They told me not to go. They said it was too risky, too unstable. That danger lurked around every corner. This is the story of what really happens when you step inside the most dangerous country in the world. From checkpoints and armed guards to raw human moments that changed everything I thought I knew. This journey was unlike anything I've ever experienced. What I found shocked me, and it just might shock you too. It's the kind of question that gets raised eyebrows, hushed whispers, and wide-eyed warnings. Why would you go there? That's what everyone asked me when I booked a flight to one of the most feared and misunderstood places on Earth. They called it reckless. They called it foolish. They called it dangerous. And yet, for me, the draw was irresistible. Curiosity, courage, and the thrill of exploring the unknown took me far away from comfort zones and tourist brochures. When people hear you're traveling to the most dangerous country in the world, they don't ask why. They ask if you've lost your mind. They send prayers, warnings, and links to government advisories. But sometimes, what lies behind fear is not madness, but curiosity. Sometimes, the places the world tells you to avoid are the ones that teach you the most. This is not a story of recklessness. It is a story of stepping beyond headlines. It is the story of discovering humanity where chaos supposedly reigns, beauty where danger is expected, and resilience in the very soil others call unsafe. I traveled to a place the world has branded as hostile, not for thrill or fame, but to see it with my own eyes. 10. The arrival was not what I expected. I arrived with my shoulders tense, eyes darting for danger, heart guarded behind a wall of fear. The sky was warm and golden, and the air smelled like spice and dust. Taxi drivers leaned on their cars, laughing. Children waved from behind fences. There was no screaming, no sirens, just life happening in its own rhythm. What I expected was chaos. The fear I carried didn't belong to the place. It belonged to the stories I'd been told before I ever landed. 9. Danger wore many faces, and most were kind. Yes, there were checkpoints. Armed men with blank stares and sharp eyes. Some streets felt tense, their silence filled with invisible weight. But in the markets, old women beckoned me to try unfamiliar fruits. In coffee houses, strangers invited me to sit and talk, as if language was no barrier. A boy ran beside my car one afternoon, not to beg, but to wave. The people weren't the danger. They were survivors, storytellers, and protectors of their culture. And again, I was treated not as a threat, but as a guest. 8. The landscape was wounded, but breathtaking. Beyond the cities, the land opened like a cracked painting. Scorched hills, dusty plains, rivers that had seen too many dry seasons. Ruined buildings rose from the earth like broken bones, reminders of years lost to conflict. Wildflowers dared to bloom in the shade of wreckage. It was a place marked by scars, but not defined by them. The land carried pain, but also beauty. It was the kind of beauty that doesn't scream. It whispers if you're quiet enough to listen. 7. The stories were heavy, and they stayed with me. Every face had a history. Every conversation turned, eventually, to what had been lost. A shopkeeper showed me a bullet hole in his wall, untouched since the war. A woman opened her door to me and poured tea, then told me how many times she'd had to rebuild. These were not just statistics. They were memories carried with quiet dignity. And even as they shared their grief, they asked about my home, my dreams, my family. Their stories were heavy, but their hearts were still open. 6. The fear was real, but so was the strength. There were moments when fear crept back in. Sirens in the night, loud bangs that made the ground tremble, the kind of tension that prickles your skin, even when you don't know why. But what stunned me was how normal life continued through it. Children still went to school, weddings still happened, music still played, bread still baked. The resilience was quiet and unbreakable. Danger wasn't their choice, but dignity was. And they chose it every single day. 5. Hospitality was a kind of resistance. In a world that calls them dangerous, their greatest response was kindness. I was fed until I couldn't move. I was welcomed into homes with smiles too wide for such hard times. Tea was served like a ceremony. Bread was broken in silence and in joy. There was a sacred generosity in how strangers treated me, not just as a visitor, but as a witness. One man told me, "If we still give to others, they cannot take our spirit." In that sentence, I heard the entire heart of this country. 4. Faith was not just religion, it was survival. Call to prayer echoed across rooftops. Hands lifted skyward in quiet streets. Mosques stood not just as places of worship, but as shelters, as meeting places, as lifelines. Faith was not just ceremony, it was structure, it was rhythm, it was healing. In a place where tomorrow was never promised, faith gave shape to today. And even those who did not pray spoke of hope as if it were part of their DNA. Hope not in miracles, but in mornings. Hope that one day the world would see more than the danger. It would see the people. 3. The food spoke in a language I understood. Even when words failed, food connected us. I tasted dishes I couldn't pronounce, each one carrying layers of memory and meaning. Spiced rice, roasted meats, fire-cooked bread, pickled vegetables, and thick yogurt. Meals were slow, generous, and shared with reverence. I learned that in a land where much had been taken, giving food was the ultimate act of love. It meant you belonged, if only for a moment. At those tables, danger faded. What remained was warmth, flavor, and humanity. 2. I saw what the headlines don't show. This country is called dangerous, but what I saw was life in defiance of fear. Children laughing, artists painting in ruined buildings, musicians playing to empty rooms, a barber who cut hair for free because everyone needs dignity, a woman who ran a library from a box, a teacher who still taught, even with no salary. None of this made the news. These quiet rebellions against hopelessness were the true story, not the bombs, not the borders, not the politics. Real people. 1. I left changed. Not because of the danger, but because of the truth. I didn't leave with fear. I left with understanding. I left knowing that the world paints in broad strokes, but people live in detail. I saw with my own eyes what courage looks like. I saw humanity in the very place the world calls inhumane. Traveling to the most dangerous country in the world didn't show me violence. It showed me survival. It showed me stories that need to be told. It showed me that the truth is always more complicated, more beautiful, and more important than the headlines. I didn't come here to chase danger. I came to understand. Behind the headlines and beyond the fear, there are real people living real lives in the shadows of chaos. This experience challenged every assumption I had and left me with a story I'll never forget. If this journey moved you too, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and tell me in the comments.